I'm hoping you're seeing just our Green Hills logo there. We decided to bring forward a few progress monitoring probes that might be helpful to people. But I didn't do this last night and I should have started with, I want to talk just a minute about the purpose of progress monitoring. I want to make sure people understand that what we're looking for is a way to get frequent data on student growth. Statewide tests don't come around often enough and take too much time. Even screening data is too spread out. And so the advantage of progress monitoring is we can do it frequently and see that growth over time. We should be seeing growth towards a target or a benchmark or towards peers. With that, we should be able to see the benefits of both core instruction and intervention having an impact on that growth towards a benchmark or towards peers. So those are our purposes around progress monitoring. We don't want to use progress monitoring to diagnose. So we don't want to narrow our instruction too much based on a progress monitoring probe. We also don't want to grade students on progress monitoring. We don't want it to drive our daily instruction, meaning we don't want to teach to these probes. It's not the intent. And so if ever you feel yourself doing that, really try to step back and think, you know, this probe is just to show us growth over time. It's not about any individual item or even any individual test. So with that, I will tell you that what we need from you is an email alerting us of which assessments you're going to give students. If you can send that email and your name and which one to math@ghaea.org, we'll then be able to release those probes to you. We're fortunate enough that with this little bit of training, we can release these probes to you free of charge. I do ask that we have no control once they're in your ownership, but I do ask that you don't share them broadly. Instead, simply ask somebody to email us. We'll email them the video of this presentation. They can watch it. They can let us know, yep, I would like to have access to this probe. We will release those probes to them. So it's not a big deal. They don't have to be here live today. But we really need your cooperation in that. So one of the many reasons we're offering this today is that some special education teachers and gen ed teachers have found themselves in a little bit of a bind, partially because changes in AIMSweb. Some have been using a previous form of AIMSweb, and AIMSweb is now updated to AIMSweb Plus, and either teachers aren't finding a match in that set of assessments, or maybe they don't have access to AIMSweb Plus, and so they need something else. FastBridge is another choice. Many schools have access to the math progress monitoring probes in that set of assessments. The problem is we're finding is that the CBM automaticity really tops out at about third grade. It goes through multiplication facts. The CBM cap, it's a little too long. It takes about, I think it takes about 20 to even 30 minutes for the student to complete that. And we're seeing it's not very sensitive to growth. Students are only expected to grow about 1/10 of a point per week. And then the CBM process might be a good match, but teachers are having a hard time getting certified, and it's really difficult to score consistently. And so those are some of the limitations that are there. If you're finding your way around them, that's fine. We're just trying to offer another solution. So today, the probe that I'm going to describe is called complex quantity discrimination. It was created by Dr. Ann Fagan, right up the road in Ames, Iowa. She is a professor that studies progress monitoring, best practice in progress monitoring in mathematics specifically. This probe is developed off of a kindergarten first grade idea. So in those probes, quantity discrimination gives numbers like 5 and 9, and it asks the student which number is bigger. And students then select the number from the pair that is bigger or is smaller. In most probes, it just asks which one is greater. Complex quantity discrimination will look a little more complex. And so it will take on some other concepts, not just the numbers value. So we think it could be used in 4th grade up. 4th grade would probably be in a general education setting. So if you were doing maybe class-wide intervention or a tier 2 intervention, that might be appropriate. For special education, it's probably more likely to be used in 5th grade on up. But you'll be able to tell by the content if it's a fit for your kids. It's a 1-minute probe. It is expected to be timed. And the ideas that are assessed include ideas around number, but also place value, the commutative property, the associative property, and conceptual understanding of the 4 operations. So it does include all 4 operations, and so you can think about that for grade level as well. So the strengths of this particular probe is, again, just like the one yesterday, it really gets kids thinking about both number and operation. And you're gonna notice when you get a chance to try some of the items, it really makes you think hard. It really isn't a surface level probe. You really have to understand the number as well as what the operation is doing with the number. And also gets into this idea of relational thinking. So it doesn't force the kids to compute answers, but to compare answers. It can be given very quickly, so that's a huge strength. It only takes 1 minute to give the probe, administer the probe, and it's very quick to then for you to score. There are multiple equivalent forms, so I can't say off the top of my head, but I think there's 24 at least. So there's plenty to give across the year, especially if you're giving it once every 2 weeks. That might be how you would do it. And so, like I said, you can use it across the entire year. The probes do need to be timed. So some of the limitations or limitations that people find is that the probes do need to be timed for accurate scoring. Just like yesterday, I know some people struggle with that idea. Please consider it. It helps with the norming of the assessment. That's why it's there, to be able to show consistent growth over time within the same amount of time. You're cutting a variable out when you give the same amount of time. Now, I'm not saying you have to pressure kids to go super quickly, but you can ask kids, move through it. I'll give you the verbiage of how they suggest encouraging kids to move swiftly through the assessment without rushing. The other limitation of this particular probe is that it doesn't measure the student's ability to deal with story problems or deal with the mathematics in context. It is just number and operations on the page. I didn't write this, but you'll also see it's a little bit much visually. And so for some special education students, you may need to just provide an accommodation of covering some of the items and sliding a paper down. Okay, so I'm gonna flip out of the presentation real quick and I'll read you the directions that you would read students, and then I'll pop the presentation back on and let you try a few items. Oops. Okay, so I'm gonna treat you just like my students. I know you can't see the paper yet, but I'll just read you the directions. Today we're gonna learn about a math task that you'll be doing this year. It's called Complex Quantity Discrimination Probe. This is what the task looks like, and I would hold up the test. The questions include choosing the appropriate symbol, greater than, and I would show them that symbol, less than, or equal to put in the box. There are a few things you should know about these probes. First, you'll be given a limited amount of time to work on the problems. You'll be given 1 minute to complete as many problems as you can. These probes are different from classroom tests or quizzes and are not meant to be completely finished. What's important is that as you learn more about math in this class, your scores will improve. Second, keep in mind that the object of this probe is to correctly answer as many questions as you can in the amount of time given. Please begin in the upper left corner and move across the rows or down the columns. There may be problems on the probe that are difficult or unfamiliar. Please look at each problem. If you do not know how to answer it, skip it and go on to the next problem. Do not spend a great deal of time on any one problem. If you get to the end of the probe and still have time to work, go back to the problems you skipped and try to solve them. Third, your scores on these probes will be used to see your progress in math. Because of this, it's important that you try your best. Do you have any questions at this point? I would hand them out, ask students to keep their probes face down and write their names on it, set the timer. Please turn your paper over. You will have 1 minute to complete this probe. You may begin. So those are the directions for the probe. I will now show you the probe and give you a little bit of time. You are only going to see a portion of the probe. You will not see the entire probe. Okay, let me click to the probe. And you would just have to write on scratch on your piece of paper yourself. Okay, I didn't set a timer. Like I said, I didn't give you the entire probe. But now let's talk like teachers. Could you give me a little bit about what you notice in this probe or questions that you have? And you may type them into the chat or unmute yourself and just ask. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. Somebody has to wonder, what if my kids don't know the greater than or less than symbol? And what I can tell you is that I've talked to the researcher about that question in particular. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to get back to the presentation. Sorry, guys. So I'll leave it off for a second. I can't find it. What the researcher says is it is okay to circle the value that is greater or use an equal sign. So rather than kids getting tripped up on using the less than or greater than symbol, you know, this symbol or this symbol, they can just circle the answer that is the side, the expression that is bigger, or write equal to. And that's fine, you can score it that way. Does anyone else have questions or a chat? One other thing just to note, it certainly does do whole number work and all 4 operations, but you should notice it has decimal work and fraction work as well. Okay. So just on the administration and scoring of this particular probe, it is a 1-minute probe. So you would need to use a timer to be very consistent. No calculator is allowed. The intent is not to calculate each item and each expression, but to think about the numbers presented and the operations that are presented and be able to compare and think through which has a greater value. These are simply scored by number correct, so you just count up the number of items that are correct. There's no penalty for skipping an item, and there's no penalty for a wrong answer. So it simply is number of items correct. It is not appropriate to have this be a percent, like have them complete the whole page and then give a percent correct. It really is, I really ask that you score it as the researchers created. That was the way they were able to show their growth, is by doing number of items correct. With that, I'll just show you the data that they have came not from a huge sampling. And so I want to caution you with these norms. These, you don't have to write these down. This will be shared with anyone that's on this Zoom meeting. But you can see, I'll just look across 6th grade. The fall average is, or mean is 17. It grows to 20.5, and then it grows to 23.7 across the year. When you then look across that whole year, the slope or the growth per week is roughly 0.31. So it's about 1 point in 3 weeks. And you can see across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that it's about the same. Each grade starts a little higher. Now, this was taken from a very small sampling of students. It wasn't in a really diverse, lots of different places nationally or anything like that. So there are limitations with this particular, these data sets. And so I really ask you to use them cautiously. When I talked to Lisa last night, really think about at least initially being kind of on the low end for those rate of increases that you might write into your IEP goals. We always want aggressive growth, but you might want to be on the low end at first until you can kind of check on how students in your district are going to grow on this particular probe. Another thing that you can do just to kind of check where your school and your students fall is by giving this probe to all the kids in a particular grade. So if I have an IEP student in 6th grade, I might give it to all the 6th graders either in that student's class or in that student's grade, and actually see if the mean is approximately 17 here in the fall, or somewhere between 17 and 20, being between the fall and the winter score. That would give me another little data point to say, yeah, maybe these mean scores are representative of my school as well. And with it being just a 1-minute probe, I know most general education teachers would be happy to help you with that. And the scoring will be quite easy. If that's something you want to do and you need or want support in that, you could certainly reach out to us. If there's a way, then we can gather some of that data and kind of confirm these norms. That might be helpful to us as well. I'm pausing if there's any questions there. Like I said, that this whole slide deck will be shared with you, but certainly this table will be a part of it. Lisa was also nice enough to write up a possible IEP wording. You can read it on screen. I probably should read it out loud just in case the video isn't terribly clear. In 36 academic weeks, given a 1-minute complex quantity discrimination probe, reflecting the number properties of place value, associativity, commutativity, and conceptual understanding of the 4 operations, student name, will earn blank points by analyzing pairs of quantities and writing the correct symbol between them on 3 out of the 4 consecutive trials. Now, again, you can change the way the symbols, those relational symbols of greater than, less than, or equal to, you could have it be by analyzing pairs of quantities and circling the larger or the greater quantity. That would be just fine. Lisa also noted that that rate of increase, kind of sticking to that lower end of the grade levels being 0.31 as a possible way to calculate that. Well, that's all I've got for information. I can certainly click back to any slide that you need to see again, and I'd love to answer your questions or hear your comments on this probe or questions on progress monitoring. All right, then, we're getting speedy at this. We're under a half hour. Please, I'll sit on for a few more minutes. If there's any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them here. You can also shoot us an email either at math@ghaea.org or directly to me at cterry@ghaea.org. I'll type it in, but you guys are also the ones that obviously reached out to get the link. So you probably have access to my email already. Okay, folks, last thing before I sign off then, my team didn't plan on this before we offered, but do expect some kind of little survey. This is a model, gathering you guys together in this little quick afternoon session is a model that we'd like to try with other content as well. We're super happy that you don't have to come out of your classroom and you don't have to drive. And so we want to know how this works for you and what other kinds of content you can see value in delivering this way. And so when we send out that survey, if you can respond to that, we would certainly appreciate, and we would see what we could do about offering other opportunities. So thanks for your time. and hope to see you again. Tomorrow is about algebra. It's really kind of sixth grade standard, so don't be scared off that it's algebra, but it's called Algebra Basic Skills. Have a great afternoon and evening. Enjoy this day. It's beautiful out, and we'll see y'all later.